Okay, so we're now recording, so I will now hand over to Joe.
Thanks, Pete, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, whether you're watching live or if you're one of the many people who will catch up via the recorded version over the coming weeks and months. And before we get started, as Pete said, a quick reminder to the viewers, you can ask any questions at any point just by sending your comments to the engagement team via the chat box, which is an icon. It's on your screen. It looks like a square speech bubble just at the bottom of your screen there. So today I'm delighted to say that we've been joined by trailblazing RAF engineer, Terri Hawkins. Terri joined the Women's Royal Air Force in December 1986 and did her basic training at RAF Swindon before moving to Halton for mechanical trade training, one of only 3 women or RAFs on the course. Now, Terri left the RAF in November 1995 after almost 9 years of service. Now, looking back at that time, Terri, we can see that on paper at least, there were some real breakthroughs for women in the RAF. So we had, I think we had the first female navigators, took up posts with the Hercules fleet in 1990. Restrictions were lifted on women becoming fast jet pilots in 1992. And the Women's Royal Air Force itself formally merged with the RAF in 94. And this date is often cited as marking the full integration of women into the Air Force. So we're very thankful to have Terri with us. I'm very much looking forward to hearing about the everyday realities of women in the RAF, and especially a woman in the mechanical trade during this time. So my first question, as always, is why did you join the RAF?
That's a difficult one. I don't know really, other than the fact my nan and granddad both did 2 years service after the war in the Air Force, and always spoke very, very fondly of it. In fact, they met and got married through meeting in those 2 years. But other than that, I didn't know anybody else who'd served or anything. I just, I think we had a careers officer come to the school once, and I just fancied it. And from about the age of 13, 14, I decided that's what I was going to do.
Oh, so there was no, you weren't in the cadets, or there was no wider kind of family connection or anything?
Not that I know. I don't even know if we had cadets in our area. It's not something I'd even heard of until I joined up. So, no.
And you joined up straight from school, did you?
No, I went to college for a couple of years. I applied to join when I was 17, but they offered me YTS airframes, and I didn't want that. I wanted to be an electrician, and I didn't want to be YTS. So I worked in a factory for a year, and then reapplied when I was 18 and got exactly what I wanted in the end. So it worked to my advantage.
Yeah. You did your basic training at Swindon, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And you arrived at Halton in February 87 to actually begin your dedicated training course. And you were one of, well, not many women on that course, were there?
There was 4 of us. Only 3 of us passed out as electricians. 1 remustered. She just didn't grasp electrical principles at all. I think it was 15 of us on the course, and 4 of us was girls. So really, that was quite a high percentage for a MET course going through. So I was sort of under the impression that there were quite a few of us around.
Were you soon disabused of that notion when you went out into the wider RAF?
Well, yeah, first of all, I got told I was posted to RAF Broadie, and even the corporal telling me I was posted to RAF Broadie didn't know where it was. And it was a very long train journey from Halton to Haverfordwest, and then a bus to RAF Broadie, through all these little villages in Wales I couldn't pronounce, with far too many L's in them. And then I got to Broadie to discover that the WAF block had only just opened a few months earlier, and I was only number 15 WAF. They went into total panic because I looked very young, and they thought I was the first under 18-year-old, so they'd have to start doing bed checks, but I actually was 19. So they were quite relieved. But the following day, when I went to Eng Manning to arrive and to say, oh, I'm here, I'm meant to be going to the line, they went into panic zone because they didn't realise I was a woman. And they didn't want me working on their aeroplanes.
Okay. So just going back to Halton for a moment, was that course what you expected?
Again, I didn't. I mean, I'd done a year at college doing electrical principles. So I was, the electrical side of it wasn't too scary, but I honestly didn't know what I was letting myself in for when I joined the Air Force, let alone what I'd be doing or anything really. It all came as a bit of a shock, but it was a pleasant surprise in the end.
Did you feel you had a bit of a head start having done the electrics course beforehand?
It was a bit of a mix, because there was a couple of the lads that were also about my age or slightly older who seemed to have some sort of experience in industry and whatever. But then we had I think 6 or 7 of the lads were YTS, so they'd come straight from school, so that they had no experience at all. So it really was a bit of a mix on the course.
Okay. And how were you treated by your course mates?
They were great. It was a bit of a mixed course with the 4 girls, 7 YTS, who'd come through Hereford, not Swinderby, so there wasn't the usual connection of coming up together, and then the rest of the lads. But yeah, I think we gelled as a group in the end. It was a bit tricky to start off with, but we did gel, and I'm still friends with a couple of them now. In fact, a few of the lads were on my fitters course later on, which was quite nice.
Yeah, I imagine that was quite helpful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned RAF Broady. You went there in August of '87, didn't you?
In fact, it was exactly today, however many years ago. Yeah.
25th of August.
Yeah.
So what was it like? I imagine Halton was quite busy and Broady probably wasn't. I get the impression that Broady was actually quite small, out of the way. Had you heard of it?
It was a sleepy little hollow. It was the Air Force's best kept secret. It was a real work hard, play hard place, but because it was so out the way, I never got posted to Germany, but I hear it was very much like that for the social life, because people didn't go home at weekends, or yeah, it was really good. It was, and most of the girls being posted in our little gang were straight from training, so you know we were quite up for going for a party.
Yeah, when you mentioned RAF Broady beforehand, I looked on Google Earth to find it because I'd never heard of the place. I zoomed into it, thought there it is, zoomed out. There was just nothing around it at all.
Except for beautiful Pembrokeshire coastline. It's gorgeous up there. We often go back every year to meet up with old friends and to take the children surfing.
So what is Broady now? Do you know? RAF Broady?
It's an army base. It's an army base now. Signals, I think. We actually had the pleasure of being, we have a little reunion every year, obviously missed this year, and they had an open day while the reunion was on, and we actually had a coach tour around the old airfield and everything. But the army were very accommodating and very nice. So
I bet you could give a lot of that tour yourself, couldn't you?
Probably, yeah. Well, there was an awful lot of armourers on the reunion, so they were getting a bit carried away about the bomb dump and things.
So you said you were RAF number 15.
Yeah.
Is that right, at Broady? And the first...
Approximately, yeah.
Approximately.
Yeah.
But the first one, the first tech to be there?
Yeah.
So was it daunting when you found out that you were the first female tech there?
It was more daunting just to know that nobody wanted me. You know, you've sort of done all your training, got there, and then they're like, the line said, we don't want her. So they suggested I went to schedule servicing, and they reckon they didn't have toilets that I could use, which turned out to be wrong. And in the end, the bay said, oh, we'll have anybody. So I ended up working in the bay.
So was anyone on your side when all this was going on?
Not really, no. The only thing that happened is when I was in the bay, because I'd got to know some of the people over in sheds, and they actually worked on the aircraft, although it wasn't the line. They did get me like a 2-week work experience, which really I shouldn't have been doing. I should have been there genuinely, but they felt sorry for me, I think, because I hadn't been near an aeroplane. So
just for the benefit of people like me, and for me as well, what's the difference between the sheds and the line?
Shed servicing, they put the aircraft out of action for a certain amount of time to do like a major overhaul on it, whereas the line is day-to-day servicing, and usually fixed to the line you have rectifications where they fix the little bits and bobs that go wrong on a daily basis.
Okay. And it was the line that they didn't want you working on? Yeah,
which is where most of the mechs go. It's where you learn your trade. It's where you learn how to, handle an aircraft, marshal an aircraft, It's what you spend most of your mech course learning, and it's what you expect to do when you come out of training.
So did they give you a reason? Were they explicit about saying you're a woman, so therefore we don't want you here? Or were there other things that other reasons that they gave?
I overheard the conversation from the warrant officer to the young clerk that I was speaking to, and it was very, very rude, and basically that he didn't want any expletive women working on his expletive aircraft.
Charming.
Yeah.
So then you went to the electrical bay, is that right?
Yeah.
So what kind of work do you do there compared to on the line?
Bits and pieces that get taken off generally from the schedule servicings, but if things get broken, get sent there and you fix them. So it was good. I mean, I learnt my trade well. I learnt how to be an electrician well. We even got bits not just off the Hawks, we got bits off the Sea Kings coming in to be fixed as well. So it was quite a mix of items. As an SAC, I wasn't meant to, but I did sometimes get in with doing some of the work on reading what was coming off of the black boxes, the ADRs and all that. But that was really quite interesting. And they tried to get me on a course at Holton, but you weren't allowed as a mech. You had to wait till you were a technician.
So these black boxes, what kind of things would you get from them? I'm always interested in black boxes because I personally don't know how they work or what kind of information you can get from them.
On a day-to-day basis, they just every so often would take them in and take all the information off them. I imagine it's a lot easier now. We had an entire room for downloading them. Now I'm sure that isn't the case now, but it just came off on a big screel of paper, and it was just all sorts of little lines, but if you knew what they were, it would tell you when the undercarriage went up and down, and it would tell you how fast it was going, and it would tell you it's just all of the things that the pilot could see, really, and it would tell you the entire flight basically.
Okay, so at this point in time you're still in the air electrical bay, that's right?
Yeah.
I imagine you still very much wanted to actually get out on the line.
Yeah, definitely.
And were you able to make any headway with that? I mean, were you in the air electrical bay and think, okay, I've got to do this to prove myself, even though I've already proved myself beforehand by being able to get here, that kind of thing? Or were you always pushing to try and get on the line?
I was pushing to try and get on the line, although I was enjoying my time in the bay. But more and more girls were getting posted in. We had a Lecky technician who got posted straight to the line, and we got a propulsion technician. She got posted straight to the bay, but as a technician, going to the bay was probably more appropriate. And we had another mech posted in. She went to VAS. And I started seeing that the girls were actually getting a bit more action than me, and that wasn't fair. So I started making a bit of a noise. But all of a sudden, I got told that they were swapping me with the JT that was on the line, because they felt that she should be in the bay and I should be on the line. So my chance came.
So did you feel you'd proven yourself by this point? Did you feel that you'd had to prove yourself?
Yes, yeah. And on the line, I felt I was had to prove myself all the time, because I wasn't a brand new, wet behind the ears somebody from training. I'd been on the camp a year, and a lot of the lads had been a year's worth of being a liney is quite a lot of experience on one aircraft. So they're usually the ones that are training up the people coming in. So I had lads that had been at Broadie less time than me, training me up on the line. But I picked it up. I didn't make a fuss. There was one occasion I remember when I had to carry some batteries, and the aircraft batteries are quite heavy, from one side of the hangar to the other, and I just carried one. And one of the guys said, Trina, the other Lecky, they said, she carries two. So I went back and got both and struggled down the hangar with it, and they went, but she'll take the Land Rover. So they were constantly pushing me, and I was pushing myself a bit because I had a point to prove, really.
Did you feel it was good humoured pushing from your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, I'd say 99% of it was. There was always one person who'd perhaps go a bit too far, or there was a couple who didn't really like having girls on the line, but I felt that if I got on and did the job, I'd sort of prove that I could do it, and it shouldn't be a problem.
So all these obstacles that had been put in front of you to this point, was there ever any point where you thought, what am I doing here? I've done all the training, I've done everything that's required of me, but I'm being denied these opportunities that are going to men?
I didn't feel it too much at the time, I don't think, but when I look back, I sort of think that's not fair. It's and I did feel that I had to put 110% into virtually everything I did. And then you'd see the lads messing around and you think, nah, that's but I did get my fitters course quite quickly, so I suppose that it paid off in the end. And I was the one usually given the new lads to train up because they knew I wouldn't send them for a long wait or for a length of fallopian tube or to turn the windsocks on or whatever.
So whilst you were doing this job, is this where you had some trips abroad?
I was lucky enough to have, my first trip was to Biarritz in France. 2 Hawks had gone there for an air show and they didn't take ground crew. But the French ground crew, in their wisdom, the VAS there, had pulled the emergency undercarriage down on one of the aircraft, which had poured out hydraulic oil everywhere and had to be reset. So they needed to send a team out. And it's an independent, so you need to have 3 of each trade, so 3 electricians and 3 riggers had to go out. And so they had a chief and they had a corporal, so they needed either a JT or an SAC to go out. But most of the young electricians there lived locally because they were Welsh lads, and their passports were at home. So we had to have a passport because we ended up flying back BA. So we had to have passports. And somebody said, "Oh, Terry's recently been on holiday. She'll have a passport, and she doesn't go home all the time." So they said, "Oh, Terry, do you want to come on a trip to Biarritz?" And then halfway through me sort of saying yes, somebody said, "She can't go. She's a girl. We can't have girls going. They need chaperoning." And my chief, who was going out, said, "Oh, she needs a bloody chaperone. I'll be a chaperone." So I went, and it was brilliant. Yeah.
So again, did you get the feeling that your chief and your colleagues were on your side, and this was something that was coming top down? All these obstacles were being put in your way by those higher up.
I think they were nervous. I think they were always worried that they'd get, that something would happen to me, or they'd get in trouble, or whatever. But the people I worked with on a day-to-day basis knew I was capable and knew I could do it, and knew I wouldn't get into trouble, or much trouble anyway.
So that was the Biarritz trip. You had a couple of others, didn't you?
Yeah, and then the Hawks go out to Cyprus for 3 weeks a year doing tow target as part of an exercise. And I put my name down for it, didn't think I'd get it, and I did. So I had 3 weeks out in Cyprus, and it was over Easter, so we had a full long weekend off, where most of us travelled down to Ayia Napa for the weekend. But that was hard work. It was very hard work because we were flying 3 sorties a day, and in the heat, when you're not used to that heat, when you're used to being in Wales in the wind and the rain, to suddenly be doing that in Cyprus, it was very hot. It was quite hard work, but again, it was a work hard, play hard, get the work done, you go to the pub.
And so you spent 3 weeks in Akrotiri, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And did you find that the people there were fine with having a female tech? Were they?
We pretty much stuck to our own group. So the people I were with were people from Broady who knew me. We had the JT, the Lecky JT, Trina. She was out there as well, so it wasn't just me. And we had a air traffic lass out there. I think because we were such a large detachment, we took extras to help with things like the tower and stuff like that. So there was, and by then we had a female Django. Flight Lieutenant Blaine, so she was out there with us as well, so it wasn't so unusual to have a female.
I think looking at your bio, it's about this time you offered your fitters course, so we're about October 1990 now.
Yeah.
And you also got married the next month, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, that was I met Jim, he was on the opposite shift to me, so how we actually got together, I still haven't worked out now. But yeah, it was a bit of a whirlwind. Everybody said it wouldn't work, but we decided to get married before I went on my fitters course. So we just went off and got married and told everybody afterwards. But that in itself caused problems, because we got married on the 10th of November, and of course 11th was a Sunday and is generally Remembrance Day. And I wasn't down to do the parade, but a week before I was due to get married, my flight sergeant called me into the office and said that the girl that was meant to be doing it couldn't do it, and I'd have to do it. And I went, I can't fly. And he said, why? What have you done? Broke your leg or something? And I went, no, I'm getting married. And he didn't know, and he was so privileged and pleased to know that he was one of the few people that knew we were getting married, that not only did I not do the parade, he wangled us both a week's leave.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so that was quite nice.
So were there any issues with marrying a colleague?
Sorry, with what? With
marrying a colleague?
I got teased because he was propulsions and I was a lecky, and never the twain should mix. But
is there a kind of hierarchy there then, I assume, or is it just that you're separate?
Well, just separate. It was just, when you're not separate, you work together. It's just it's a banter thing, really. It's and the Leckies were a bit of a cliquey bunch. I shouldn't admit to that really, but we were. He was a JT, I was an SAC, so there was no problem rank wise or anything like that. It was just banter really, and everybody saying that it wouldn't work because we hadn't been together long.
So had you managed to spend much time together? I know you were stationed at the same place, but I imagine you were
well, we actually were both out in Cyprus together, which helped. So we had the long weekend in Ayia Napa, which I think probably cemented the relationship.
Yeah, that was the clincher.
But yeah, we I was living out by then, so he was spending any time he could with me, and then we got our own place. And then obviously we were in quarters once we were married. So whoever was on the late shift, whoever was on the early shift made tea for whoever was on the late shift. And so we always got to eat a meal together, even if it wasn't till 10 o'clock at night. So it did work.
And you say that people didn't know you were getting married. I assume they knew that you were together.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they knew we were together. In fact, we rung them all up the day we got married, our friends, we rung them up. We rung our family up first and told them we'd got married, and then we rung our friends up and said, meet us at the pub. And they went, oh, you haven't done something stupid like get engaged, have you? No, a bit worse than that.
So that was, you were married November 90.
Yeah.
So it was only February 91 that you were back at Halton for an 18-month fitters course. Yeah.
So that was quite tough because we hadn't been married long. It was a good sort of 2.5, 3 hour drive. And I didn't get every weekend off because we were naughty fitters and had to stay and do parades on Saturdays and stuff sometimes. So, and he used to come and visit me when he could, but it meant me smuggling him into the WAF block because although we were married, he still wasn't allowed into the WAF block. The lads all were, well, some of them were married and were in quarters, but they mainly in their block at the other end, and I wasn't allowed to go to their block. I could go and knock on the door, but I wasn't allowed in. So they'd be studying because the fitters course is quite tough, and they'd be studying, and I had nobody to study with. I found it quite difficult and quite lonely sometimes.
So you'd had a few years experience in the RAF already under your belt by this point, and you were, I think I'm right in saying you were the only woman on this course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And did you feel that you were treated differently on this course than on your initial course because you had that experience?
Yes, and 3 or 4 of the lads had waited a long time to get their fitters course, so they were a bit bitter and twisted, and seemed to think that I'd only got mine because I was a girl. Although there were lads on my course who had done less time than me, so they'd got there slightly quicker than me, but they didn't seem to pick on them, but they picked on me. But you know, it's all part of the banter, I guess. I mean, I could give as good as I got a lot of the time, but sometimes I'd go back to my room quite upset, thinking that was just a bit too much today.
Did you, when all this was going on, did you ever have anyone on your side who would kind of stick up for you, or would come up to you afterwards and say that was a bit uncalled for, wasn't it? Did you ever feel like you had allies?
No, not really. I mean, some of them, like I say, I'm still mates with now, and they were mates throughout, and they would have never said anything nasty. But I don't think they thought I took it to heart. I think that was the main thing. There were other girls doing fitters courses and mechs. We were all in our own block, sort of thing. So there were other girls to chat to and that, and I think a lot of them were going through pretty much the same as me.
Okay, and did you get, I know you've mentioned this briefly, but how often did you get to see your husband at this point? Because it's an 18-month course, wasn't it?
Not quite 18 months, but yeah, not far off. In fact, no, it probably was 18, thinking about. But no, yeah, he managed to get himself a posting to Abingdon, which put him a little bit closer to me. So I would go home virtually every weekend, and perhaps once in the week, and then leave early to get back ready for parade. But he arrived at Abingdon, and they said, "Why are you here? We've just been told we're shutting." So it was a bit of a strange one, but he did I think about 9 months at Abingdon, and then he put in for Bryce around the time that I was able to choose where I was going. So I put in for Bryce, and just luckily we both got squadrons at Bryce. So.
And this was May 92 now, wasn't it? You were posted to 101 Squadron at Bryce.
Yeah. We were sort of doing the clear up after the 1990 Gulf War. We're doing all the no-fly zones. That's what 101 and 216 Squadron were doing anyway, doing the mid-air refueling for all of the no-fly zones. Okay,
well, looking at the text you've put in your bio that you sent to us before, it looks like you had quite a good time with 101 Squadron at Bryce. Is that the case?
Yeah, if you want to travel, 101 Squadron was the I didn't know that until I got there, but if you want to travel, 101 Squadron is the place to go. I was spending probably 7 months of the year out the country.
So what kind of places did you go to?
My first posting, or my first detachment, was to Bahrain, but we didn't know we were going to Bahrain until we landed there. And we had a nice stop off in Palermo in Sicily on the way there. 3 weeks in Bahrain. Then my next one was Turkey. We were in Tent City out in Incirlik, which was an American base. So I'd gone from staying in a 5-star hotel in Bahrain to a tent in Incirlik. So it was very varied. I think I did 2 trips to Bahrain while I was on 101, and about 4 to Turkey. Also did a red flag out to, it wasn't the one that usually goes to America. We did one and ended up in Singapore with night stops in Cyprus and Sri Lanka on the way out, which was quite pleasant. I did a week in Norway. Did a couple of trips around America, Lincoln, Nebraska and Maine, and we went to Nova Scotia, Halifax in Canada. A few just little trips to Cyprus. Did the Azores and Madeira. There's probably more. We did a few to Scotland and things. We did a few trips up to Lossie and to Lucas.
And then you got all these nice list of exotic places you've been to.
Yeah.
You actually get the chance to go and explore them, or are you just always busy?
Most of them you did. When we were in, if you were anywhere for any amount of time, so when we were in Turkey, you know, you'd get your weekends off and stuff like that, and if you were there over a bank holiday, you'd get a long weekend off. And we went up into the mountains and over to the beach. One of the trips to Turkey, the airfield was at Incirlik was being redone, so we had to work out of Antalya. So we were staying in a 5-star hotel on the beachfront at Antalya. So we got to see quite a bit of that area then. In Bahrain, we were getting the weekends off. We're going out in the evenings. Norway, because we were there for 10 days, we had a bit of time off there. But there was some place. I went to Abu Dhabi. I didn't mention that, but we got there. The aircraft was broken. We worked till about 10 o'clock at night. Got to the hotel about 12. Went to bed. Got up at 6 and went back to the airfield again. So I didn't see any of Abu Dhabi.
So that actually brings me on to my question of why were you in these places? Was there always a different reason, or was it because something was broken, you need to go fix it and then come home?
No, we did the mid-area. We were the tanker squadron. So wherever in the world any fast jets went, we had to get them there. So any operations or any detachments or any exercises, 101 squadron took mainly tornadoes back then, but took the tornadoes to wherever they needed to go.
And they were the VC-10 tankers then, weren't they?
Yeah.
And so that's what you were working on. What was that like to work on?
Horrible. No, they were lovely. They're lovely aircraft, but they were dirty and old, and they're just after doing your fitters course where they're teaching you all electronics and stuff, and then to be working on 1950s technology, it was sort of a bit odd. But yeah, it was good. It was interesting.
So did you find that was a learning curve then, having to go back to older equipment and get your head around how that works?
Well, the thing is with 101, I turned up at 101 when they had a lot of aircraft away, but they had broken aircraft and they hardly had any leckies. So I basically got chucked in. Come on, you got to come and fix this. It's like, So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but you do it.
And this was just going back to when you actually joined 101 Squadron, that was 92, wasn't it? And that was that was the year that restrictions were lifted on women becoming fast jet pilots. Were you aware of that at the time? Was it a big moment, or is it only big now looking back on it?
Well, actually, a bit earlier than that at Brody, because we were they were training fighter pilots. We did have a couple of girls come through. So I'm not quite sure. I know the restrictions were lifted then. I think perhaps that they were allowed to train up to them, but weren't allowed to actually do the job until then. I don't know, but I do know we had the first couple of girls come through as trainee pilots.
Oh, did you?
So that was, we never really got to know the pilots at Brody. We just say hi to them and strap them in and marshal them out and marshal them back in again. But I do remember seeing the girl going through, and I remember the lads making a real fuss about it.
So the fuss they made about it, did that remind you of the fuss they made when you first joined?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I know when we were on 101 Squadron, we got the first female navigator in, and the fuss they made about that. I mean, she was very attractive lass, so I can understand them all getting, but it was a bit over the top, really. It was just another navigator.
So do you think it was a fuss because she was a female and because she was attractive, or was there talk about her not being capable?
No, I think it was because she was just a female and attractive, and they all, I don't know, young lads just getting a bit excited.
So do you think was there, as far as you could tell, the assumption that people are where they are within the RAF because they're capable? So it's not a case of they're only there because they're a woman, say, so therefore we can't trust them to do the job that they're doing because they might not be good enough at it.
I think we all the women that I knew that were in a minority did still feel that they had to prove themselves. It's hard to know what other people were thinking. I know that when I arrived at Bryce as a brand new JT, I was 22, 23, but I looked younger, and a couple of the SACs who were awaiting fitters course assumed I was a direct entry and had come straight in as a JT, and were quite nasty to me until I put them right. And then they were quite apologetic, and
So they were quite happy to be nasty to your face then, or was this kind of behind your back things you heard?
It was a bit of both. Some were actually quite snidey, made comments to me, and one lad actually openly said, I hate DEs, blah blah blah, which is direct entry. It's not fair, you coming in straight into this squadron, blah blah. And I turned around and went, I'm not a DE. I've just come off my fitters course. I've done 3.5 years at RAF Broadie, and he was like, oh, sorry. And we actually ended up being quite good mates, but so, yeah.
That's a good way to quiet him down, wasn't it?
Yeah. Truth will always out.
Yeah. So you left the RAF in November 95.
Yeah.
Why did you leave then?
When I joined up, you weren't allowed to have children, or you got booted out if you got pregnant. I by then had been married a few years, and we were considering starting a family, but with me out the country 7 months a year and Jim out the country 4 months a year, it wasn't likely to ever happen. And we didn't want to bring a child up with us both being in the forces, because back then the first few girls were going through it with babies, and they were really making life difficult for them. It was allowed, but from what we could see, it wasn't pleasant. So I just applied for a job with Xerox as a service engineer, thinking this would be a good experience. I've not had an interview for years, and actually at the interview they offered me the job there and then, and I went, but I'm still in the Air Force. But it was around the time they were, because I was signed on for 12 years, but it was around the time they were doing redundancies. So I just went and asked the question, and it took them a little while to come up with an answer, but in the end they let me go.
And were they sad to see you go, do you know?
I don't know. I know some of my colleagues were, but I don't know whether the Air Force in general. It was mixed blessings for me, because I was loving it, but I couldn't see it going on forever if me and my husband wanted to have a family. So and it was a brilliant job offer, or it looked like it was, and it was a brilliant job, but I found it very lonely because it was just so different from the Air Force. I was on my own and meeting people whose photocopiers had been broken for a week, and they were, instead of being pleased to see me, were angry because their photocopier hadn't been working for a week.
Yeah. I imagine when you applied for the job, Xerox were delighted to hire someone so technically proficient. Was that the case?
I had an aptitude test there, along with another lad. I turned up in a suit, he turned up in a bomber jacket. And I sat doing the aptitude test, and I thought, well, this is quite easy. Perhaps I've got it wrong, because he seemed to be really, because we were in the same room, but we couldn't see each other's papers. But he seemed to be really sort of studying and struggling, and I just thought, and then it turns out in the end, he'd done very poorly apparently, and had gone straight to HR to be told, we don't want you. And I'd got the highest mark they'd ever had, and that's why they wanted me there and then. And for them, it's a bit of positive discrimination, but they wanted a woman engineer because it looked good.
Well, I mean, you proved yourself in the test and in the fact that you can fix aircraft as well, so
yeah.
So when you left the RAF, did you think it was a different place then than when you joined? Because you left in November 95, which was, what's that, a month short of 9 years? A month short
of 9 years, yeah. It changed. While I was in the Air Force, I'd had a memo to say that if you get pregnant now, we won't boot you out. I mean, that was quite a big thing. I've seen more and more girls coming into engineering, and more girls going into the air trades. We didn't have, I don't think we had any female pilots on 101, but we had a couple of navigators. So it's starting to be more and more, and people's attitudes were changing a bit. I always found the Air Force very homophobic, because it had to be back then, I guess, because but that seemed to be changing slightly as well. I think everybody was starting to be a bit nicer to people, and a bit more accepting of people. I'm hoping it's that way now.
Well, I've not served and I'm not in the RAF now, but speak to quite a lot of people, and it certainly does seem vastly improved.
Yeah.
So did you miss the Air Force straight away, like within weeks, or did it take some time for you to start missing what you had?
Took a little while. I think I was quite sort of pleased to have left to start off, just to have gone into a new job and the excitement of a new job and everything. But probably within a couple of months, I was really, I think that, thinking back now, I think I was suffering with depression. I really, really found it very hard, and it was hard to pinpoint, but looking back, I know now that it was such a big thing to have left the Air Force after 9 years, because me and my husband had a house in Witney, so we weren't even living in quarters, so it really was like I completely left. Now he was still in, but he just went to work and came home. It other than going to the odd Christmas do for 216 Squadron, I had very, very little to do with anybody in the Air Force. And in a way, I'd sort of decided to make that break. Other than one or two really close friends, I didn't want to meet up with anybody or anything. Although later on, I made the decision to find people again. But yeah, it was quite hard.
And it was only relatively recently that you found the RAF Association, wasn't it? And you're a member of the RAF branch now.
Yeah. Must be 5-6 years ago. I mean, my idea of RAFA was old men in clubs with 2 or 3 people in them, and we haven't got a club near here, so it wasn't something I would have even considered doing. But through Facebook, and the WAFs are very lively on Facebook, and they've got lots of different groups, and I met up with people, went for a couple of reunions, and it's through those reunions that I met people who said, "Oh, you ought to join RAFA," and told me about it. And yeah, RAFA's been brilliant. It's been amazing. The WAF branch are just so welcoming and so lovely, and I've met up with a couple of people I knew from before, but basically I've just made loads of new friends.
So there are a lot of the people that you served with before that you're now back in contact with. Do you ever talk to them about your experiences as women in the RAF at that time? Are they broadly similar?
There's only probably one person that I see regularly that I went through basic and trade training with, and I think she feels pretty much the same as me. Through RAFA, I've met another Lecky who, her and I have had very similar experiences, and we chat quite a bit, and that's why we've become friends actually, because I mean, she's lovely. I would have been friends with her anyway, but that connection of the fact that we're both electricians, that we both served approximately the same time. She thinks she was at Abingdon the same time as my husband, which was quite a coincidence. And that we both went in as mechs and got fitters courses, and actually both worked on Hawks, but she worked at Valley, so it was all we've got lots of similarities. But yeah, she found it quite hard as well, I think, and had some of the issues I had.
So one thing that I forgot to mention was that you did all this training, and you got to where you got to within the RAF, despite the fact that you later found out you were dyslexic. Yeah.
I knew at school there was a problem, but I didn't know what it was. And I struggled. All my fittest course, I really struggled because there was an awful lot of reading and writing. Technical reading I find harder than sort of just reading a book. But it wasn't until I started doing my OU degree when I was I got made redundant from Xerox after I had my second child. So I decided that I needed to do something, and I was going to be a stay-at-home mum, but I needed something more. So I started doing an OU degree in information technology. Though you wouldn't have thought that with my not being able to get online yesterday. But and it's my first assignment I put in. The tutor came back with, have you ever looked into the fact that you might be dyslexic? And I went, and it just clicked. I suddenly realised why my short-term memory was so poor, why I couldn't spell, why I struggled if I was tired to read something. And I looked into it, and actually apparently a lot of people who are dyslexic go into engineering. because for whatever they can't do on the English side of things, there's something in their brain that clicks for the engineering side of things. So it sort of all made sense in the end.
Just back to the RAF branch, have you got anything? I know the whole coronavirus lockdown situation has stopped a lot of our branches from doing things. Do you have anything planned for the future? Are you wanting to get more involved with that?
I'm doing. I go to the AGM when I can, and I have been on a few excursions with them. In fact, it's booked next September, not this September, September 2021. A group of us are going to Poland, which I'm really looking forward to, and I hope will happen. The AGM in February is in Nottingham, and I'm booked to go on that, so I'm hoping that will happen. I intend, as my youngest is 16, and they're still at home, but I intend as they fly the nest, that I will do more and more with Rafa. That's my intention anyway.
Well, just on your children as well, have any of your children expressed an interest in the forces or the RAF? And if they did, what did you tell them?
My middle one, my middle son, he wanted to join the Air Force. He passionately wanted to join the Air Force, but he's got Asperger's, and we got told that he would not be even considered. But he's now at Heathrow doing an aeronautical engineering apprenticeship with BA. So, you know, and earning an awful lot more than he would have in the Air Force.
Is your husband retired now? Is he still?
Yeah, he left. He left 3 years after me, so he did his 12 years. And he does aircraft engine inspection, so he's flying around the world, sticking cameras down engines and inspecting them. He's actually at Bournemouth today, which isn't very exotic, but some of his travel's been curtailed because of the corona thing. But he was in France last week.
Oh, well, Bournemouth's on the coast. That's nice. It's a nice place.
Yeah.
So just on your husband, actually, he would have gone through quite a lot of this by proxy with you, wouldn't he? Your experiences in the RAF. When you speak to him about certain things that had happened to you, certain discrimination you met with, things like that, what was his reaction to it all?
He'd get quite angry, but he couldn't really do anything, and he knew he couldn't say or do anything, because at the end of the day, it's me and it's my battle and I have to fight it. But he was always a shoulder to cry on, or somebody to listen. You know, he'd listen to me. I know he found it hard when I was on my fitters course, because I'd often come back quite upset. And he'd say, you know, you don't have to do it. I do. I'm not going back to Broadie and SAC.
So I take it that you're glad that you had your RAF career, are you?
Oh, definitely. And looking back, I probably wouldn't. I should have stayed in, really. I should have stayed in, I think. But, you know, you can't go back on these things. You make decisions when you make them, for whatever reason you make them. But I love the being back in touch with everybody and the camaraderie. And 101 Squadron tends to have a reunion every couple of years, which is really brilliant. And a group of us at Broadie try and meet up every summer if we can. So it's really good.
Good. Well, I think we've about come to the end of our time now. So we have got a tradition here on Project Entertain, is to raise our cup. We never ask what's in it, by the way. And say,
sort of bottle
of water.
Yes, water. Yeah.
So cheers, thanks a lot, and thanks from Rafa for joining us, and thanks everyone else as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.